Just like Thomas Sankara, President Traore is a strong advocate of self-sufficiency. This is why he has embarked on several projects in Burkina Faso that will ensure that Burkina Faso is self-reliant and does not need to depend on the West. One such project is the revival of the Burkinabe beverage company known as BRAFASO. But how does Traore intend to revive this company, and how will this affect the Burkinabe economy? Let's find out. The Burkinabe Minister of Economic Finance, Dr. Abubakar Nakanabo, collaborated with the Minister of Industrial Development Trade, Serges Gnaniodem Poda, to revive the Burkinabe local beverage company, BRAFASO. The two ministers oversaw the signing ceremony of a partnership agreement between the government and BRAFASO. The aim of the agreement is to relaunch the activities of BRAFASO, a local Burkinabe beverage company that specializes in the production of juices and drinks. According to the statement released by the ministers, the Burkinabe government established a decree that changed the name of the company from BRAFASO to SN BRAFASO, with a capital set at 6 billion CFA franc. This decision was made during the Council of Ministers meeting held on October 23, 2024. During the meeting, the ministers adopted a decree to establish a mixed economy company known as SN BRAFASO. According to the ministers, this move is part of the restructuring of the country and a way to control strategic sectors in the Burkinabe economy. During the meeting, the Minister of Industrial Development, Serges Poda, was tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that appropriate measures are taken to revive the activities of the beverage company, BRAFASO. You see, prior to this time, the company had shut down and liquidated, and its assets were transferred to the state. However, with the new decree adopted by the government, the newly revived company will now be operational. As we said earlier, the company is a mixed economy company, which means that it will be partly owned by the state and partly owned by the private sector. To kick off operations, the company requires a capital of 6 billion CFA franc, out of which 70% will be provided by the government and the remaining 30% will be provided by the private sector. Now, according to the minutes of the Council of Ministers meeting, the creation of SN BRAFASO as a mixed economy company will have the impact of reaffirming the role of the government within the framework of the National Policy of Industrial Recovery. It will also help to reduce unemployment among the Burkinabe youths and transform the local Burkinabe beverage industry. In addition, the company has the potential to reduce the importation of beverages for the benefit of the citizens, which overall will help to strengthen the Burkinabe economy. As earlier stated, SN BRAFASO is intended for the manufacture and sale of finished and semi-finished beverage goods, as well as the manufacture and sale of beer, malt, fruit juices, and alcoholic beverages. Now, during the signing ceremony, President Traore gave a resounding speech, highlighting his joy and desires for the newly revived company. He said, "Today we gather together to mark a momentous occasion that reaffirms our commitment to economic sovereignty, national pride, and a prosperous future. I am delighted to announce the creation of SN BRAFASO, a mixed economy company that was established by the decree of the Council of Ministers." But this is more than just a business initiative. It is a declaration of our intent and determination to build a country where the fruits of our labor remain within our borders, support the well-being of our people, and contribute to our collective prosperity. SN BRAFASO therefore represents the essence of our government's vision for an independent and self-reliant Burkina Faso. We are reviving the activities of the former BRAFASO company that once served our people proudly. Today, we breathe new life into it with a capital of 6 billion CFA franc, 70% of which comes from the state and 30% from our partners, the private sector. This partnership will no doubt bring us closer to our goal of a resilient and self-sufficient nation. What a powerful speech from President Traore, and it highlights his passion and determination for a self-sufficient Burkina Faso. This project is a collaboration between the government and the private sector, emphasizing the fact that both sectors can work together for the progress of the country. But the question is, why is President Traore making this move? Before we continue, here is a reminder to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel if you have not done so already. Well, you see, since independence, Africa is generally regarded as an import-dependent region. The majority of African countries depend on foreign goods and imported products, which have heavy costs on African economies. To make matters worse, some of the imported products, such as food items, are things that could easily be produced on the continent. According to reports, Africa spends billions of dollars to import food products that can be produced locally, utilizing the continent's abundant agricultural resources. Ethiopia, for instance, Africa's second most populous state, is heavily reliant on imports for value-added food, which means raw agricultural commodities that have been transformed into higher-value products such as ketchup, cooking oil, and fruit juice. Nigeria is also another African country that relies heavily on food importation to sustain its populace. Nigeria annually imports about $8 billion worth of food and agricultural products, including wheat, fish, brown sugar, and food ingredients, many of which can be produced domestically. However, heavy reliance on importation, especially for essential items, has hit African economies really hard. As a result of reliance on imports, local African industry struggles to survive as they are faced with competition from imported products, which are usually cheaper. This has a ripple effect on the economy because when these industries are struggling, it means that there will be not enough job opportunities. That means unemployment would increase. Reliance on import has stunted the growth of local industries and made the pace of industrialization in Africa to remain stagnant. This has made African exports majorly raw materials that are sold at cheap prices at the international markets. The West gets the raw materials cheaply and uses them to produce finished goods, which are sold at a very expensive price to Africa, thereby increasing the standard of living. In addition to this, reliance on imports has weakened the local currencies of African countries as they have to look for dollars to be able to import. Currently, the currencies of most African countries are struggling to perform against the dollar, leading to high inflation rates and high cost of living expenses. Now, the former company, BRAFASO, was once a prominent state-owned enterprise that provided locally produced beverages to the people of Burkina Faso. The company was also a major source of employment for the citizens of Burkina Faso. However, as a result of some challenges, including financial, managerial, and political issues, the company was liquidated and its assets were transferred to the state. This incident, however, led to an influx of dependents in the beverage industry. The absence of the company saw an increase in the importation of soft drinks and beverages that ordinarily would have been produced in Burkina Faso. Burkinabe stores were now filled with foreign brands, contributing indirectly to the growth of foreign countries. However, Traore decided to do something about this situation and revive the fallen company. With this company in operation, Burkina Faso will no longer be a mere supplier of raw materials or a passive consumer of imported products. With BRAFASO, the importation of beverages in Burkina Faso would be reduced, thereby strengthening local production. This will in turn create job opportunities and improve the Burkinabe economy overall. As earlier stated, the revival of BRAFASO is part of a major undertaking by the Burkinabe government to restructure the state and place control of key sectors firmly back in the hands of the Burkinabe people. According to President Traore, BRAFASO is the product of his commitment towards reclaiming that which was lost. It is also an initiative that will set the trend for a broader wave of industry renewal. Now, the establishment of the company as a mixed economy company with the government holding a 70% stake highlights the government's intention to lead by example. It reveals that the public sector and the private sector can work together to drive progress and growth in the country. But reviving the beverage company is not the only step that Traore has taken in recent times to create a self-sufficient nation. Recently, Traore made the decision to ditch Western attire and adopt locally made Burkinabe fabric for schools and government offices. Indeed, this is a revolutionary move and a testament to his vision of reclaiming Burkina Faso's sovereignty and national identity. Burkina Faso is developing and revolutionizing its textile industry in a way that fosters cultural pride under Traore's leadership. President Traore announced a new initiative in a speech to replace Western attire with school uniforms made of locally produced fabrics. But there's more. Additionally, he declared that Burkinabe-made fabric would be used for military and police uniforms and halted the West's importation of uniforms. Additionally, Traore mandated that all magistrates and clerks wear faso d'enfani, a traditional cotton-woven fabric, during official court proceedings. In addition to being revolutionary, this is magnificent. How many leaders in Africa are thinking in this manner? The only thing we hear about some African leaders is how they fly around the world in private jets, attend meetings they don't need, and try to get their country's resources for nothing and power. President Traore, on the other hand, has established himself as a shining example for all African leaders to follow. However, Traore wasn't the only one who came up with this idea. No, he derived it from the revolutionary Burkinabe leader Thomas Sankara's ideals and vision. You are aware that Thomas Sankara was renowned for the principles and ideals he held regarding independence and self-reliance. Sankara stated, "We must succeed in producing more, because it is natural that he who feeds you also imposes his will. We are free," in an address to the United Nations in 1984. You can't expect anything from someone who doesn't feed you. As a result, he opposed World Bank and IMF loans and advocated for self-sufficiency in food and textile production. Sankara emphasized the vision Traore is currently putting into action and bringing to life in a passionate speech delivered a few months prior to his assassination. Sankara wore one of the locally produced Burkinabe fabrics as a proud symbol of his vision for the Burkinabe textile industry during the powerful speech. Traore lamented in his speech how Burkina Faso's rich textile heritage has been overshadowed by Western fabrics. Then, he went on to explain why every Burkinabe citizen should use locally made fabrics instead of imported ones. Sankara saw the adoption of locally produced textiles as a revolutionary act that had the potential to completely transform the country's textile industry, not just a fashion or economic decision. Sadly, Sankara's assassination prevented him from realizing that vision. However, 1,000 Sankaras would be born, as Sankara stated prior to his death. Additionally, Traore is one of the Sankaras who have made the decision to realize Sankara's vision. A significant step toward realizing Sankara's dream is Traore's decision to mandate the use of traditional, locally produced fabrics for school uniforms, military uniforms, and police uniforms. However, this policy goes much further than merely acknowledging and promoting Burkina Faso's cultural identity. In addition, it entails generating a significant and consistent demand for local textiles. Traore established a local textile factory in Burkina Faso to meet the citizens' uniform requirements in support of the initiative. However, this facility is more than just a production facility. In fact, it is a representation of Traore's dedication to economic empowerment and self-sufficiency. It is anticipated that the factory will lead to job creation, skill development, and further textile industry expansion. You would agree with us that the majority of Africans now tend to prefer Western fabrics and styles over our traditional ones. This is due to the fact that the colonial masters decried everything African, including African languages, culture, and traditions, as well as food, music, and even clothing. They perceived African culture as primitive and barbaric. In addition, they ensured that Western ideas, culture, languages, and traditions were imposed on Africa during the colonization period. Furthermore, the colonizers were largely successful, if we are being honest. African languages are one example. Over 3,000 languages are spoken in Africa. However, the majority of African nations' official languages are all those of their former colonizers. Isn't that unfortunate? The decision to accept Western languages as their official language was made on a continent with so many diverse cultures and languages. In order to effectively spread their principles and ideas, the colonial masters imposed their languages on Africa. They accomplished this by utilizing Christian missionaries to promote Western education. They did not want to develop the colonies. Rather, they wanted to impose their ideas on Africans and make them learn just enough to understand their principles and ideas, so they built schools and encouraged them to learn these new ideas. As you can see, Africans have not been taught what is truly required for industrialization and development in schools up until this point. Africans only receive theoretical instruction and never practical instruction. Because the struggle for independence only really began after World War II, when Africans were fighting the war and interacting with people from other nations. If they actually did, independence would have occurred prior to 1960. Africa appears to be the only continent where the official languages are those imposed by colonial masters, which is very unfortunate. It is wrong and illegal to speak your native tongue in African schools, and it's made worse by the fact that some young people today don't even know how to speak their native tongue. However, President Traore is challenging this conventional wisdom and has begun a journey to embrace his nation's cultural identity and sovereignty. Because of this, President Traore announced a few weeks ago that the Burkinabe local language would replace English in the country's national anthem. The Burkinabe Ministry of National Education said in a statement that the national anthem has been translated into 14 local Burkinabe languages to help people feel more patriotic and move away from neo-colonial practices. In addition, Traore's decision to wear Burkinabe clothing rather than Western fabrics is another effort to promote patriotic sentiment and move away from neo-colonial practices. Traore is making a strategic move to support domestic production by prohibiting the import of police and military uniforms. This is due to the fact that redistributing this demand to local manufacturers will support the textile industry's expansion in Burkina Faso. But what does Traore's choice mean for the economy and society as a whole? First of all, Traore's textile initiative is part of a larger strategy to ensure that Burkina Faso fully embrace their cultural identity and promote Burkinabe craftsmanship and identity, as we mentioned at the beginning of this video. For instance, the vibrant Faso Dafani fabric, which has been mandated to be worn by clerks and magistrates during court hearings, is rooted in Burkina Faso's long history. Patterns that are representative of the country's cultural motifs and design are used to weave the material by local artisans. Therefore, Traore is creating a national identity that can be seen and represented in public institutions by mandating the use of the material. In addition, the requirement of traditional fabrics in everyday attire, particularly in schools, helps the younger generation maintain their sense of cultural pride and identity. Youth in Burkina Faso can be connected to their heritage in this tangible way, fostering a sense of national unity and cultural continuity. However, in addition to embracing Burkina Faso's cultural identity, this action has a financial impact. First and foremost, Burkina Faso is making a significant progress toward lessening its reliance on imports from other countries by outlawing Western imports and prioritizing domestic production. This is because it has the potential to boost the national economy, improve the trade balance, and create opportunities for economic growth in a variety of fields. The good news is that this initiative aligns with Traore's larger vision of a self-sufficient and independent nation. Imagine how rapidly the textile industry in Burkina Faso will develop over the next 2 to 3 years. Watching a vision of growth come to life at this time is truly an amazing and exciting time. We can confidently assert that President Traore is the greatest leader ever. Burkina Faso's identity, sovereignty, and independence have all been the focus of everything he has done since taking power. Traore took control of the gold mining industry, which had been controlled by terrorists and parties from other countries. Even worse, Burkina Faso lacked a gold refinery, which limited the country's revenue to the sale of raw gold, leaving it out of a significant value exchange. But Traore changed everything when he started building a gold refinery and put an end to gold exports. Burkina Faso is able to control its resources, retain a larger portion of its revenue, create more jobs, and refine its gold locally. President Traore is truly a remarkable leader who is worthy of emulation. His determination to create a self-sufficient Burkina Faso is a vision that every African leader should endeavor to follow. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video.